Here's a principle of stellar coevolution. All stars in a system evolve together at their own rates. So you have another dichotomy here. You have in stellar metamorphosis, the objects are evolving if they're bright and hot. They're evolving if they're a lot cooler and still bright, like red dwarfs. They're evolving if they're Jupiter-sized objects. They're evolving if they're Neptune-sized objects, and they're also evolving if they're Earth-sized objects. And all these objects are all hosts to other dead objects or other evolving objects. Earth is the host to the moon. Neptune is the host to, I think, Triton or Titan. I can't remember. I think it's Triton. Titan, I think, belongs to Saturn. Jupiter is a host to Ganymede, Callisto, Io. Red dwarfs are the host to other objects, and the sun is host to many objects in the solar system. And they're all individual constructs. They all evolve together at their own rates. Now, the hot young stars, they evolve quite rapidly because they're losing a lot of heat, energy, and matter to solar wind, coronal mass ejections, and flaring. But as they cool and lose all that mass, they shrink and they start dimming considerably. The sun will become a red dwarf later down the road, and it will continue radiating that heat away and have large flare events. Eventually, all that hydrogen and lighter elements is lost, and you keep on losing it until it becomes something like a Jupiter-sized object, which means the evolutionary timeline will have it going slower and slower as it cools and dies, which means as they evolve, they are on their own program. They're not all reliant on the sun. They all have their own rates of evolution, meaning these have been around longer than these have been around longer than these have been around longer than those, and it's on and on and on just like that, which means this is also an adaptive system. That's another principle, though. They all tie together. In establishment science, they like to put things inside of boxes to make sure the math works out. So they put all stars as shining, and those are the only objects that evolve. These are the parent objects, and everything else is just the remains, leftover remains of these things. But that isn't necessarily true. But the big difference here is that the bright shining objects are evolving, and the objects that no longer are bright and shining and that have visible spectrums are not evolving, which is really, really weird, because they certainly are evolving. Jupiter-sized objects will lose mass to photoevaporation and to the flare events that the sun will exhibit, losing mass for many billions of more years, eventually resembling Neptune. And Neptune will lose its outer layers too over time, and then begin exposing the little rocky ball that it's been forming over many, many billions of years. And that's the whole process. But what establishment does is they put a big wall right here. They say these are the only evolving objects, and these objects are unimportant, uninteresting, and we should not study them in depth because it would be a waste of time. We already know how the planets form, but that certainly isn't true at all. They don't understand how stars evolve, and they certainly don't understand how planets form. Little do they know, it's the exact same thing. Planet formation is stellar evolution. And I wrote some notes here. There are no models for the evolution of stars that do not shine brightly or have visible spectrums. If you go on Wikipedia and you look up Jupiter, you won't see any evolutionary model for that. It all rests on the sun. You won't see any evolutionary model for Neptune. It's all resting on the sun. And you won't see any evolutionary model for Earth. It's all sun-centered. They have young stars as being the constructs that somehow were around longer than the oldest stars, which is completely contradictory. They all revolve around the largest stars in the system. That's obvious, but that doesn't mean that they're resting on these objects for their own evolutionary stage. They're on their own program. They're OFP. And the biggest difference is between words. And I know it's semantics here, but when you see publications and you see the word parent objects, you'll know that they're using the assumption that these are the leftover remains, that these somehow came from these, which is really weird. These are individual. They're not related to these younger objects at all. These have been around way, way, way longer than these. If you see the term host, that's more correct. This hosts objects. This is a host. This is a host. But they're not parents to any other objects. They're not related at all. All right. Today is May 28th, 2016. This is the principle of stellar coevolution. They all evolve together, not as resting on the youngest star in the system. All right, there you go. Oh yeah, Baz, I hope this helps you.